Thank Cork City Libraries for arranging this. It's been great to, I've already obviously chatted to Gaye on the phone, which was amazing. So I know this will be a very, very interesting conversation. Gaye's background is to publish 5 novels. There's 2 in this series, which is obviously Mine That Is My Brother and Turtles All the Way Down. And then you've written 3 books based on your experiences in Africa. What I thought was quite interesting is you've published non-fiction children's books, one on Roger Casement, and we were talking about how it was deciding whether or not to put in obviously what was a controversy back then around his sexuality, and that ultimately did go into the book, which is fantastic.
Clarify, it was the publishers, of course, were deciding whether or not it should go in. Obviously I want to put it in.
Yeah. And it's just one thing I've kind of realized about after us talking and reading it is that you live in quite a fearless way, and that is really reflected in the way you have written. Just the way you have went to Africa and your sort of sense of adventure with that. Without further ado, I mean, it'd be lovely. I asked you earlier, are you happy enough to maybe read a couple of paragraphs of the opening of the book, just to kind of give us a sense of the Cork accent, because the book, the voice in this book is so strong, and it'd be lovely to hear some of it read.
Okay, I'll do that, but I'm sure the people listening to me have possibly better Cork accents than I have. I don't know.
I think Will is a very strong contender for a nice strong Cork accent, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Are you saying I'm an Ori? Like, I admit I am, but
Are you an Ori? Yeah.
I am, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Yeah. My Nori experience was when I came back from Africa, right, with 3 kids. Yeah. And I was on the dole, the classic story. And I was living in Mayfield, right? That's where I was for a few years before I, moved.
I'm not far from Mayfield.
Yeah, nearby, yeah. So, sorry, I'm branching off now, the request to read the thing. But do you mind if I go ahead, Jamie?
Oh, work away. What?
It's just that, like, so much of the book came from that fact that I had sort of come back from Africa. I'd been away for 16 years with breaks, I'd come home. But to come back and living in Mayfield and in a sense being kind of rather like Tony in Mine That Is My Brother, in that I was of the place, of Cork, and yet I was a bit of an outside. I was sort of outside in that I had been away for so long. So I'm coming back and I'm listening to the accents and the humor and, people's behavior and so on and so on. And it was all sort of fresh and new and really hitting me as something really fantastic, and really new. So that's how that all got into the book, It was kind of an awful lot of that. And the stuff about Mayfield and all the rest of it was like my own direct experience, really, And
Yeah.
For example, in the book, or if you've seen the play, either version, the long version, years back, or the recent shorter one, things like, for instance, the scene about the bus driver, which featured in the play. If you've seen the play, yeah, Mark has seen the play. Maybe the others have had. And the bus. Did you see it too, Will?
I saw it in the granary.
Oh, did you years back? Yeah,
yeah,
you saw the full thing. That's right. Yeah. So something like that bus driver scene, like that, actually was me on the Mayfield bus, and actually witnessing this guy who was singing "I will always love you," right, and the door banging open and shut and all that. So, that was my own direct experience of something like I witnessed and I put in the book. Yeah. So anyway, right, you want me to read? I don't have an Ori accent. I don't know what kind of accent I have. My accent must be partially West Cork, because I grew up in, my family are Cork City people, all my relatives, my family, but I grew up in Bantry as a child and then in Bandon as a teenager. So I'm a kind of a mix of Cork City and West Cork. Okay, Jesus, if I can see the thing. Adam, where are you? The technician. That's what I'm doing. Okay. My brother Liam knew I wanted to be cremated, and my ashes scattered onto the grave of Holy Nelly, Holy God, back in the Good Shepherd Convent in Cork. So he had me cremated over and he brought me home in a bag, in his luggage bag, in a shoulder bag. I thought it was a nice touch, you know, like Oscar's a handbag. There I was, not born or bred, but at any rate dead in a handbag. You never know what to expect, do you, at any stage? You know what they say about rest in peace and all that? Sure, it's all bull. I've had nothing but hair-raising experiences since I died. Like on the boat, there we were, staring at the waves, and Liam looking nice with the wind blowing at his Luke Perry quiff. And he listening to my Vangelis tape on the Walkman. And I'm on a high because I can hear it too. And it sounds grand with the rhythm of the boat. And then there's a bit of the song. You asked me where to begin. Anyway, I'll skip that. When the next thing I know is a well-heeled fella further along the rail lamping us. Here we go, says I. My heart sank to the bottom of the urn. I don't have to tell you I wasn't in the mood. Liam never let on, but I could tell by the glint in his eye that he knew he was onto a good thing. Took me down to the bar and propped me up against the counter. Starts chatting him up. Oh, sorry. I can't see what I'm doing. In the urn, in the bag, like. And here comes your man and starts chatting him up and buying him pints. Jesus, I sweated buckets in the 3 hours they spent there down in pints and groping each other on the side. I just knew he'd stagger off at your man and leave me there. I had this picture of myself slashing around on the bar floor, awash in beer and vomit. I could have wept. When I thought of the peace and calm at little Nellie's grave and the nuns praying over me. And what if Liam and your Mano went into the Jacks for a quickie and he left me there? Imagine spending eternity going back and forth over the Irish Sea in the Jacks or the St. Brendan. Might be all right for entertainment value, like, come to think of it. As it happened, when you did stagger off, he remembered to swing me up in the shoulder, and it was my misfortune that your Mano had a cabin. And so I spent the night thrown on the cabin floor instead, listened to him bonking each other senseless. You can imagine how I felt. I could smell it, even if I was only ashes, and so on.
It's funny, I think your Cork accent gets stronger actually when you read. I suppose the first impression that came to me is when I was reading it was, I was actually thinking, because I'd watched It's a Sin recently, and that kind of final line of It's a Sin, I don't know who else has seen it here, it kind of ends with the main character who is in their final lines before they actually succumb to HIV, and he's just said, that's what people forget, that it was so much fun. And I suppose the idea of it was, you know, the series was so focused on sort of the bleakness of the person dying, but he was a young man who'd lived the life he'd wanted to live, and he didn't want that forgotten. And it was something, when I was reading your book, it was this mix of obviously this tragedy in the back, you know, in overshadowing them, but you never forgot the fun. You know, in a way, it was something that just kind of clicks between the two. You never forgot the kind of banter between the characters, the humor of their lives. And in terms of how you wrote it, I mean, the characters you've written, what was the initiating inspiration? What was the thing that sort of meant the first sentences went on the page, I suppose?
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is, going back to me and the 3 kids and just back from Africa, and I decided, classic again, to write a book, yeah? So what would I write a book about? And of course, I wanted to write a book about Cork, because as I said, I was there and it was fresh and new, and I was very energized by the whole Cork thing. And then I decided that the thing to do was to write about this friend of mine, and who was my sister's best friend, right? And so because it's such an amazing character, and that is Declan, right? Not Tony, Declan, right? So Declan was always supposed to be the center. He was the person I was trying to write about. And I started writing it, and it wasn't working out. I was trying first person, third person, you know. It kind of wasn't happening for me. And then my sister, who's a great lateral thinker, said to me, well, she said, you could always get the fella in the urn to do the talking, right? Yeah. So I thought, yeah, maybe I could. And I started off writing in the voice of the fella in the urn, Tony. And as soon as I started that, Tony took over, right? And his voice took over. And off it went.
Right.
That's how it started. But Declan was actually the center of my focus, in fact.
Yeah. And so it would have been, and did you find, because I mean, the book is so driven by voice, that the voice just naturally flowed out of you? Was it something that you had to really work to develop, or sometimes you just hear the voice and you're almost transcribing the voice?
Tony just took over. Yeah, he really did. He just took over, and it just went like that. Then it was so easy, you know, and the whole thing worked with him telling about. So it was my sister's idea, really, to have the fella in the urn do the talking, and on it went like that. But the thing is that it's easy for me to talk about, apart from Tony, who you could say is my creation. It's easy for me to talk about the other characters as if they're not something I created, because they're all largely real people. Yeah, they all were real people. I give you a clue, if you remember, the people in the book club who have, I don't know whether you've had much time to read, Jamie, but the others have read and talked about the book, whatever. And for example, if you remember the Uncle Ned character that Declan visits in his non-gear, that was my father. That was my father. Yeah. And Liz, who's Declan's friend, that was my sister, who I got an awful lot of of info from too, about the whole scene and so on. So actually, like, my creation is limited to Tony, and the others are all real people.
But in terms of, because I mean, it's an amazing conceit to have the urn. Was there anything that you were writing where it limited you? You're like, oh, I want to do this, but I'm talking from the point of view of someone, you know, who's dead and in an urn, and I can't. Did it limit you in location, or was there anything like that where it kind of challenged you?
Not at all, quite the reverse. Okay. I mean, there was great freedom, obviously. Somebody who's already dead, you know? Yeah,
I suppose you just move him around. Where you need him to be, you could.
And he's all kinds of different perceptions, and, you know, and he's going into all this existential stuff, which very much comes out to in the second book, in Turtles All the Way Down, about his position and about, you know, what the hell am I doing here? You know, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And then at one point in whichever book, he kind of says, well, you know, it's like life, you know, you're here, you don't know why, you don't know how you got here, you know, you don't know what the fuck you're supposed to be doing, you know, and this type of thing. So it was great freedom writing about with his voice.
And I suppose just, I think of 95 being a very different time to now, and you wrote about obviously gay sex quite explicitly in places in the book. And were you nervous about doing that at the time? Was it something you felt, was there any kind of apprehension about it when it was, you know, going to be published and out in the world? And how was the reaction? I mean, the reviews obviously at the front of the book are fantastic. It was, you know, amazingly well reviewed, but was there any backlash to such a story at the time, or was it?
No, I had no problem about it whatsoever. You know, and I so much of it is journalism, you know, other than fiction, because I interview people, and people talk to me, and piles of the stuff came from the Declan person, the real Declan person, you know. So I got all the explicit details, and I knew I had it all, you know.
Okay.
But I was very lucky, because at that time, Poolbeg Press, the editor in Poolbeg Press was Kate Cruz O'Brien, the daughter of Conor Cruz, you know, Conor Cruz O'Brien, and the Poolbeg were delighted, feathering their caps to have her. She suddenly just took on the job. She wasn't an editor previously, though she was a writer. And she was very liberal and whatever, and she thought, this is fantastic. And, you know, she just overrode it. Nobody objected, because they wanted to do it. So Kate did it, you know. And then I'm branching off. But then Kate used to always say to me, I helped her a little bit with some editing work. And Kate used to always say to me, and to everybody in Poolbeg Press, she'd say, if I step under a bus, I want Gaye to edit my authors, right? And then in 1998, in the middle of a phone call, she was a young woman, she dropped dead of a stroke.
Oh, wow.
Nobody even knew who she was phoning that day, and she died. And
Oh, wow.
that's how I got my job.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And did the book need, when you were working with Kate, was there a lot of back and forth in terms of editing, or was it quite fully formed when she took it on, or?
She didn't do a damn thing with it, no. So, in touch with it all, or any of my books. But to go back to your question, because about the reaction about gay sex, what have you, I don't remember hardly any negative reaction at all, or in reviews, and there were a lot. And I remember one reviewer talking about that, I forget how it was phrased, but it was sort of a wonderful thing about that I really knew how to express the intimacy, and the sort of spiritual aspects and all that of, sexual love and all that. But on the other hand, I had a very good friend who, for years and years, who I knew in Africa, right, in Nigeria, but she was Irish. And she said that she started to read it with her daughter. I mean, they did read it. A very, very close friend of mine, right? Great fun, great woman. And they started to read the book, and she said that, by the second page or whatever, maybe even the part I read there, she said, "Oh, we were throwing up," she said. Yeah. That's what she said to me. Yeah. So, I won't say I lost her as a friend, but of course it made a big difference to our relationship, So maybe I've just forgotten about it. I mean, I know, there were difficulties for me. I've forgotten all that.
Right.
But there were, now that you mention it, that friend of mine, I remember that. And yes, I do remember that it made... Did
you get any letters from people, anyone?
And various relationships I had,
Okay. And did the kind of the response of the first book have any impact on how you wrote the second? Or I suppose because it got such good response, then I probably encouraged you to write the second, or were you writing the second anyway? Was it kind of something that led on quite quickly?
I suppose it just seemed natural to continue to explore Tony's dilemma,
Yeah.
So on I went. That was it. Yeah.
In terms of, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was. Is it okay for us to ask questions?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I was just going to ask a few questions and absolutely open it up to whoever.
Oh yeah. Just while you were talking there, Jamie, about was there any controversy to the book, or was it difficult for you to get the book published? Gaye, was there any kind of I suppose critiques from kind of religious quarters as such, given the amount of Deck dressing up as the nun and the involvement with the Good Shepherd convent and Nellie?
No, good question. No, I said that the people in the book are all real people, yeah. And the two nuns in the book were actually the nuns that taught me in Presentation Convent Bandon, right? Okay. And they sent me a congratulations card.
Oh wow! Okay.
Oh wow.
Now, whether they actually read the book, I couldn't swear to, but they sent me a card congratulating me on my success and all this, yeah. So nothing like that from people like that. I do remember that Books Ireland, there isn't anybody here in our audience from Books Ireland, is there? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway. Books Ireland said I couldn't write, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But they were talking about nothing to do with the gay scene. They were talking about the language. And somehow they didn't get what I was doing with the language, yeah. And they even criticized that it was inconsistent, the language. And of course it was inconsistent because I was matching the language to each individual character, right?
Yeah.
So some of them would speak this way and others speak that way, and a variety of accents, and I was interpreting that. And Books Ireland somehow didn't get this and accused me of inconsistency and said that I couldn't write. Yeah. that was before I wrote another 4 books, of course.
But I think as well that kind of banter that I suppose I'd have with my gay friends, where it can sometimes seem quite harsh, but actually you need to understand the tone of the way it's being said to kind of understand, it's that kind of banter that's kind of going back and forth, which if someone didn't understand it, it could be misread, I suppose. I don't know if that's maybe what there was.
Dublin people don't like Cork people. Is there anybody from Dublin? Do I see any heads? No.
No, it's all Cork.
No.
I don't like Cork people anyway. You know what I mean? I know that well. My publisher being in Dublin and all the rest of it. I mean, they resent us simply because we like being Cork people. You see, they don't understand the fact that we like who we are and where we are, and we want to be here, and we don't want to be in Dublin, right? So that might have been something to do with Book Ireland's reaction. I'm distracted myself now. What was the question, Jamie? Mark? Oh yes, the characters and the banter and all that. That reminds me of something you said a bit earlier, where you said that you were talking about the emotion and all that, yeah, and about the emotional aspect in the book and all that, and that brought to mind the scene, which again is a true life scene, where they get drunk at the beginning of the book because Liam has come back with the bottle of whiskey that he got from the fella on the boat, right? And they start drinking the whiskey and they all get drunk. And by the time Declan's mother comes down and says, "What are you doing? What's going on here, thing? You're all drunk," and they're absolutely flutered at that point, right? And Liam says to her, I think it was Liam, and rather than Declan, Liam says to her, he bursting laughing, he says, "Tony's dead." He died in England, and they're falling around the place laughing, But that's it. It's complex, it's complex. They're deeply disturbed by Tony's death, and love him very much. They get drunk, and this is how they express it in humor and.
Oh, sorry, 1 second there. I just have a dog who's.
Can I just there for a moment? I don't know if I actually have a question. But, when I read the book, it was like reading my own history, because I'm from that time. I knew a lot of who I thought were the characters in the book and had great fun trying to pick out who was who and who wasn't, because I have to say I have never read a book that you got the exact situations perfect in Cork City at the time. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but on the night of the play, we were talking to you in the foyer, and you had a question about a gory hole in a certain toilet on the Grand Parade. And had you gotten it right, you were asking, there was 2 or 3 of us talking to you, and I said, "Oh, you got it spot on. It was the 3rd cubicle down. It was the gory hole." And it was like everything about that book, I was crying in parts of it because of the memories and everything. But the whole thing about the humor and death, I think gay men at that time, and even now maybe, we deal with, these deep emotions and stuff with humor. And I particularly anyway find humor. And when Jamie was saying, that banter amongst gay friends, I mean, bitchy cannot be described as sometimes. And they're your best friends, It's like.
Well, the meanest things I've ever been told about me have been told about by my best friends. Like they said.
I've been told some terrible things, I think.
Yeah.
Slut. Media whore recently because of certain things I've been doing. And it's like, with friends like these, who needs enemies? But back to the book, I mean, it just brought up so much for me. I mean, there were scenes.
But it's not just gay people, though. Yeah, it's Cork people too.
Cork people, yeah.
It's not as if you're actually. Well, of course, at that time in particular, you kind of were a separate thing, but nevertheless, you're sort of part of the whole and the whole Cork thing. Or you meet somebody, you don't really greet them, you crack a joke. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's actually I found this. Because my sort of history of gay Cork would probably be from the 2000 on. But there's a book, Queer Republic of Cork, that came out a few years ago, which I was reading, and. There's a club across from the police station. Is that 4 McCurtain Street that you're referring to? Yeah. I was reading my history, trying to figure out where was where. So, okay.
Do you know where it's a casino across from where the old guard station used to be? It was right above the casino.
Okay.
And I swear, I tottered in there as a 15-year-old, drunk out of my tree because I was terrified of being seen and then the guards stationed across. And the fun about that club was at Saturday night, it used to only be on. At Saturday night, 2:00, we'd all fall out and around, cruising around on the dock, straight from it. We said at one stage for the first year of that place, there was about 12 of us that used regularly go. It got incestuous. We just all wandered around. And what I enjoyed about the book was you got that, but also the whole bit of bringing in the religion was brilliant for me. Because it's only in Cork that Cork people would get the whole Nelly of Holy God stuff and things like. I grew up with that with my mother and everything, it was just fucking hilarious, to read. Because I'm an atheist now. I spent 4 years studying to be a priest, but all that religious upbringing and everything in that book just brought back a period, which was a sad period at times, because I'm writing my own book about my life.
Oh yeah.
And also the humor that was that I'd kind of forgotten how we dealt with a lot of that stuff.
I know, we were heroic, really, I mean, looking back and to think if the club, it was all criminal, but the part I have about the being across from the Garda station and the Garda raids and the kind of attitude of the Gardaí, which
we all had cups of tea. There was no drink served, so we had tea and coffee. You bring in your own alcohol and pour it into the tea, because they were always raiding it to see if we were serving drink. It was bloody hilarious to start. Big rush with the cups, everything was
right. Yeah, I got that in the book. That's right.
It was so. That's why I enjoyed the book. I was reading that and thinking, oh my God, I remember that night. I remember that.
That's right, yeah. And the scene where they go through the wall into the deaf and dumb. The Deaf and Dumb Club, that's factual too. They're escaping from the Gardaí, they go into the Deaf and Dumb Club, they're signing, they're pretending that they're actually...
It's so funny, it really was.
And people would criticize me for that, even with the play, they were doubtful to put it in what would now all your PC milieu that we are in, unfortunately. And my only defense is it happened just like that. It's real.
Exactly. You have to. That's what I enjoyed about the book. Words you say what was real. Why write a fictional book about the time? Fine, pure fiction. But you were writing what was happening.
Yeah,
so
I think
you well recognized Dave Gordon in that, eh?
Yeah, I picked him out.
Dave wanted me to write a script.
Yeah.
And he was going to do it. As some friends of his kind of said, "Oh yes, jazz hands and all."
He was one of my heroes, because we used to go into the Chocolate Oak and he used to be sitting up at the counter with the Bonnie's, the sweater, those ardent sweaters, long cigarette holder, and in the 80s, none of us were really out, in and out, and here was this man sitting there. We used to adore him.
But he was marvelous. I mean, people die, you write a what in the newspaper? Obituary and all that, and articles in the newspaper. The Cork newspapers, they all said that he was a hero of his times, because the support he gave to young gay men was, as you just said, was tremendous.
Parties at his house would be I don't know if they could write about them. We had such parties up in that place on Wellington Road. It was unbelievable, the parties he used to throw. And it was not a big house, it was a small house. Got to know quite a few families.
So sad it's all gone with.
Yeah, it's part of my culture that I really kind of feel, we've marriage now, we're all respectful. I don't know.
Oh God, you all have to be respectful now.
I want to have all the fun again.
I know, there's no fun anymore, is it? No.
I know, even with the Queen of Ireland, the documentary a few years ago, there was something in the outsiderness of the way the sort of 90s scene was in Dublin that was, I mean, I'm not trying to sort of whitewash kind of a situation that was extremely difficult, but something in the kind of community of it being just so defined as its own thing, where I know a lot of people talk now, because of everything being so acceptable, that kind of loss of that kind of gay identity being so strong, or, as you said, with marriage equality and all that. So is there anything, that's I suppose the question you can ask, a lot has been gained, but what has been lost, I suppose, compared to because I was reading the Graham Norton book recently as well, which is about the kind of generations of gay men in a family, one for who's coming of age in the early 90s, kind of probably around the time that, you're setting this book. And then the youngest, who's a nephew in it, who's kind of coming out at 19 and married at 25, and it's all happening in the local town and it's all fine. And I suppose one of the questions I've literally on my list here was, do you feel anything's been lost? Or actually, Will, you'd probably be able to answer that as well.
It's not for me to say, right?
Yeah.
Well, personally speaking,
ask Will again.
Yeah, personally speaking, everybody at this book club knows my views on gay marriage and marriage. Let's say marriage, because gay marriage. I'm not a believer in marriage because I think it's a horrible institution. But I think assimilation, we can lose a lot. We assimilate. I have this fear of we disappear. We become but also it's being acceptable on the heteronormative lifestyle. If we adapt it, we're couples, they can understand that. Like there's a binary thing, two people. There's this. You even have stupid questions like, who's the woman? Who's the wife? Who are you two men together? And all that annoys me because I come from a generation where before AIDS had just hit, and I'm living with HIV myself, we had a certain sense of freedom, and then AIDS hit. And it was like, oh my God, all this down. I believe we would have had a totally different world if AIDS hadn't hit, because we struggled we wanted to kind of overthrow society and have a different where all relationships of all types would be recognized, different families. And now I find we're kind of sanitized. And I have to be very careful when I'm talking to younger gay men. I do a lot of talks on sexual health and everything, that I'm not on PC. And that really annoys me. Because, I mean, we fought hard for this, and It's a Sin recently has shown it, like what it was like. And we did have fun amongst it all. Like we really did. It's a Sin, even there's parts in It's a Sin that, even though it's a horribly, sad at times, the humor in it at times just have you in tears. And I just feel it's great to have made all the gains. I love all the gains we've made, but I feel that people talk about the gay community now. Like, I'll be honest, here in Cork, I don't know of a community.
And I said to you before, Jamie, on the phone that time about Alex again, the actor, the young actor who went to San Francisco, and like him saying that some of his gay friends didn't go to see the play, they kind of thought, that's all, this kind of camp thing, and sort of all in the past. And that he was saying to them, but these are the pioneers, those people in the 70s, the 80s, whatever, these are the pioneers. These are the people who fought, as Will has just said, to bring us where we are now. So it's important, and it's important.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, because I have it down here that it's Tizzy, isn't it, who you mentioned on certain, I can't remember what page it was here, but about them getting sort of gay bashed really and kind of beaten up a lot because, quite effeminate and obviously gay, and how I was thinking into kind of modern times and so much of the culture within gay culture of the effeminate being seen as lesser than, or to be the sort of straight passing, and there's a whole it's like it's gone into the culture rather than the other way. I don't know if that was just something that when we were talking about like what's been gained and what's been lost, I don't like that, what I mean. I like when I think back to even we hear about Stonewall and stuff, and it was through people of color, drag queens essentially, who drove that, and even the film whitewashed that completely, and it was suddenly white, very straight acting gay men who were leading the show, and I wonder, is that because it's to suit the palate of a wider audience, rather than actually telling the truth, which your book doesn't do, which is great. But I don't like it when in the scene now where it's definitely, you can sense that hierarchy in certain subsections of that group, where to be, effeminate is something that, people were getting bashed, gay bashed years ago by people outside of the community, and now it's happening within the community. Not bashed in that way, but
rejected. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Well, it's like It's a Sin. The characters, all the main characters were gay actors, and I've just watched a documentary on BBC with Ollie and them in it, and they were being questioned why have gay actors? It's a whole controversy of straight men, and somebody made a very good point. Well, if we accept that a straight actor can act a gay man, but we object to gay actors acting straight. They were not talking exactly about the thing here. Is it saying that gay men can't act straight? Or do we have to? It's that whole thing of somehow we're still less than, and particularly the femmes, the femmes. I mean, I go from some days, John here and Bruce are probably my two best friends. I go from, oh, I'm extremely fucking femme today, and then no, I'm a real butch, and then I get, no, dear, you'll never be butch. Well, fuck, I try. Like, now I've kind of given up. It's just who I am on a day, and I just find it. If you're on these grinder sites or anything, which I don't, it's
yeah, I know.
Isn't it a kind of? Isn't it really a kind of
straight
sexism?
acting?
Sorry, what, Robert? Yes.
Isn't it? It's. I mean, it's sexism. Really, it's just. It's within our own community. It's like if you're feminine or you don't act straight, or you sort of don't stick to the norm of what masculinity should be, or you act like a woman or something like that, then that is now seen within the gay, because this thing of like you'll often see on gay profiles on Grindr or Gaydar or whatever, no fats, femmes or queens, that sort of language. And like I find that very demeaning. I mean, like I don't like that whatsoever, because it's like making explicit your own prejudice without even realizing the privileged position you occupy when you say things like that. It's like I don't know, at least I'm a male, you know, I'm gay, I might be gay, but at least I'm a man. You know, it's that sort of like occupy, you've been pushed down, your privilege has been taken away from you by your sexual orientation, but not all the way down to the bottom. You still have a little bit of self-respect because you act like a straight man.
In terms of, there was and this is all because after I watched It's a Sin, I kind of went down the rabbit hole of looking into 1980s kind of gay history, I suppose. And there was definitely a tension. It was actually a US documentary I was watching and a couple of films where there was kind of a gay community who were like, we're here, very out there and just kind of very unapologetic. And there was this kind of more conservative gay community who was like, we have to show them we're normal and we can fit in with everyone else. And there was this kind of clash between the two. Like, there's a really famous guy, is it Kramer? I can't remember his name, who was so out. Yes, sorry, the name's escaping me. In the book, like in your own book, you know, you have obviously very explicit gay sex, and there's also, you know, money involved and kind of prostitution and things. I'm assuming I read that right. Did you have any reaction from a kind of more conservative gay community who was like, this is not the message we want? You know, if we're telling people we're like you know, talking about getting money and going down the docks and all that, that is not going to help our cause. Was there any reaction from that? No, I just was curious if there'd been. No,
I don't. I don't think there was that kind of consciousness.
Okay.
At the time I wrote the book, which after all was in the 90s, not in the, not the 70s. I mean, as you realize, there's a mix and gathering of, I don't know why I did that, but do you know what I mean, of time periods in the book. It's all kind of mixed up, right? Because I was there observing things in the 90s, but a lot of the stuff I was writing back was back in the 70s and the 80s, you know. I don't remember that at all, no.
No,
I think perhaps a lot of that sort of accusation of, you know, like straight people like if you write in a way that opens up the reality of it, and it's too raw for a lot of people, because like even in the heterosexual community, for example, like Cork is there's about 100 prostitute place what do you call prostitute places for straight men to go to in Cork. 100. There's 100. But nobody knows about it. It's all very cloak and dagger secret. And so the fact is that the straight men are promiscuous themselves, very promiscuous, and get up to all sorts of no good that their wives have no inkling about. And so when the gay guys come up and they start being very clear about what they do and what they like, what their proclivities are, then it becomes too threatening and too close to home for the straight men, so that it threatens that sort of hidden privilege or something. I don't know. I think that's the issue there. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think what JB was saying about the 80s and 90s in particular, it reminds me of a book I read on a struggle with the plague or something. It was about the 80s, and it was like the good gays versus the bad gays. The bad gays were all of us who were like down the docks, going to bathhouses, enjoying ourselves, doing things. And particularly when we started trying to fight the AIDS epidemic, it was like, no, we've got to present ourselves in a certain way, like, you know, to them. And that took off. I mean, before that, there was not real battle for gay marriage or anything before that. It was all about equality on our terms. And then because we were trying to be, oh, you know, we need to get them on our side, but you always had the other ones who fought back. Like when I was diagnosed with HIV in 2007, I had it said to me even then, and 2011, which isn't that long ago, like, you know, oh, you were a slut. You did certainly by gay people, other gay people. I'm the ones who let us down, like, you know, and as Robert said, I just think it's not just straight men who are all promiscuous. Gay men who are promiscuous are hypocritical as well. They can point the finger at the bad gays and say, oh, look at you, but we're trying. So it's like that's
sort of gradients of how bad, like where on the gradient, you know, this is okay, but you know, it was just something that just dawned on me there as going into the conversation was there's always been kind of gay figures in sort of Irish and British culture, and I was thinking of like Danny LaRue and other kind of characters, but it's always the safe asexual kind of, you know, it's a non-threatening kind of a gay, whereas this book is not, you know, these are people actually having sex, you know.
Your Mano, oh God, Lily
Savage.
Yeah, Lily's, and all that, you know.
Mr.
But that's never been seen. That's never been seen as threatening, But on the other hand, I mean, Irish people, in a sense, are quite tolerant. I mean, well, look when it came to the same-sex thing, you know. I mean, I don't know. I think on the whole, Irish are fairly compassionate people,
and also the Irish become
let them off, like, you know, kind of attitude.
Yeah, and also the Irish become sick shit of the church. I mean, like. And the domination of the church, so that people now are like very sort of tired of sitting and doing and trying their best to meet the expectations of this hierarchy and the system, which is rotten to the core. And so people I think the Irish population are so sick of that they're probably more progressive than the Dutch in terms of sexuality in this day.
Yeah.
It's funny because I read, you know, The Boys, the McLeamore and Edwards Hilton, which a friend gave me a few years ago, and it's amazing that just was very in plain sight. You know, it seems to defy. I'm still not. I still they as a couple seem to defy how I think of that time period, and I don't know, maybe other people in there, you know, have some enlighten me on that a little bit. It just seems so, because I think it wasn't when one of them died, the president went and essentially paid his respects as if they were married, you know. So I mean, I'm only just throwing it out there as
strange, isn't it? But of course, no, I mean, they were significant people and just accepted as such. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, I don't know, who was it just talking about homosexuality? I can't remember who, about people finding homosexuality and feeling it as a threat, and he said, why should people think of it as a threat to, you know, the established society? He said, you know, heterosexuality is as popular as ever, right? Which is very true. This is very true. Gayness has been around for, like, you know.
Yeah. The only problem with gayness, and it's just something that I was watching a documentary that Ollie Thing did on his own life after. It's the same. It's an hour-long documentary where he's talking about things. One thing he said, because I thought it was going to start that gayness was a mental illness, because he was talking about when he used to self-harm and everything. But he made it clear it wasn't the gayness. It was being gay in a heteronormative world. is the real problem, because we tried to fit into everything around us is structured heteronormative, and when you're not fitting into that, and that's why I have terrible difficulties with gay marriage, gay everything, and becoming heteronormative to be acceptable. I'm 63, and I swear to God, I am more flaming queen than I've ever been now. Like, I'm more out there, I'm more anti, because I'm sick and tired of people trying to slap me into this. Right, say like, oh, you know, when you think of getting married and everything, and I have my ideals and stuff that I've worked all my life to live by, and now at long last, I'm happy in my own skin. I'm not going to. I mean, it's great for those who want it. Don't get me wrong. I voted yes and everything in the referendum. I was a witness at John and Bruce's marriage and everything. It's to have the choice.
Yes,
I feel those of us that don't have the choice to not want that lifestyle are kind of threatening to those who want it in some way, where it just.
Right. Yeah. You're so right. No, good on you anyway.
And Ireland is lovely and tolerant, but we still have a gay helpline that's run 7 nights a week. So if everything is perfect, we wouldn't need a helpline. I always say to people who talk to me about it's wonderful now in Ireland, well, why do we have a helpline that people call into 7 nights a week?
Yes, good point. Yeah.
You know, the one thing, Gaye, now I know this is a minor topic, but I actually was in the other place. The other place was still in existence just when I was in UCC. So definitely the first couple of years. So that was the part of the book where I was like, oh, I know this place, because I think most of the other places had gone, and then I think Instinct came very shortly after that.
You remember going down the stairs to the dance floor, Jay?
I do. I remember because the first time I went there, probably a very similar description to you saying going to McCurtain Street, you know, drunk and not, yeah, exactly, terrified of being seen, because I suppose it wasn't that it was criminal, but I, you know, had a community in the city who I didn't want to know that I was going there. And I remember going in, there was a bouncer there. Jesus, what's his name? I could probably even know him. So a few years after, like I'd known him from around. And he was like, he was kind of a muscly kind of a fella. I can't remember at the time.
Big tall guy, Ger. He was muscular.
Yeah, muscly. And I think he had to sign in, I think. And he was like, are you sure you're in the right kind of place at the time? Because I think I was wearing like Nike tracksuit pants or something. So, because I was a little country boy in the city. I did have flashbacks to, yeah, it was over 2 floors or something. I'm kind of, because I was quite drunk in there the few times I was there, so it's a little vague, but.
Well, it had like,
those were the days.
On a Saturday night, we only had the bar upstairs and the thing, but there was a little restaurant there, and there was a thing as well during the day. It was open as, we used to do the helpline out of there.
Oh, okay.
Ger hit on you that night. That was his woman, and he knew guy came in the door. It was always nice, because then he'd hit on them later on upstairs.
Nothing, no, actually. Do you know what? I was so.
Jamie, could I ask you?
Yeah.
Sorry,
your microphone is about 10 times louder than everybody else's.
Ah, okay.
I'm wondering if you turn yours down and we could get more balanced.
Is that any better? I've just moved it.
You take your volume down a lot. It's your input volume is too high, so it's causing it's causing distortion on the signal.
Okay.
Buzzing as you talk. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it gives me an opportunity to say, Gaye, the thing that got me a lot about your book was that we lived in Midtown Manhattan in the middle of the AIDS crisis, and we were in the midst of it all. And we were there for, you know, love, valor, compassion, and Angels in America, and all these things. And to come here, and the first thing that Will did was give us your book. And it was such a different way of looking at it. It was upbeat, it was funny, and it was, you know, just literally such a different point of view that it really broke through, you know, and it really taught me a lot about Cork at the same time. So it was a lovely introduction to being here.
That's lovely. Thanks, Will. Thank you so much.
I've given a copy of that book to even lecturers in UCC when I was doing my degree there in 2014. I just wanted them to know I was doing the contemporary study of religions and philosophy, and we were talking a lot about different things, because two or three of my lecturers were gay, and I was like, here, you've got to read this. were on about Cork. Like they wanted to know about the past. I said, read this. It's the definitive guide to what Cork was like.
I'm jealous now, Will. How come you never gave me one when I came?
I told you, you scared me in UCC. You were very.
We have a couple.
I was back there as a mature student, and here was this guy who I always thought was the intelligentsia, like, you know, really above me and everything. You kind of, oh.
We still have 2 copies. I'll give you one.
To get back to your philosophy and whatever you're studying, but to get back to the subject of religion, of course, the reason also why the book is so much about religion is simply because of Declan, because of that character also. But of course, it portrays the general Irish society and Little Nelly, Holy God, and all the rest of it, and the Sacred Heart, and so on. But he, of course, was he wanted to be a nun. I mean, that's what I write in the book too. He
I forgot that. Yeah,
he figured his life was ruined because he couldn't become a nun. You know. So and he was.
I had a hairdresser like that actually. When I came to Cork in '99, there was a hairdresser. I won't say his name now, but he also had this thing that he wanted to be a nun, and he was obsessed with nuns. Gay guy as well.
Yeah.
Should join the order of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
I remember summers, like when I was home from Africa, and I'd be driving the said Declan, whose name wasn't Declan, of course, all around visiting all these nuns in enclosed orders, you know, and we'd go in and we'd speak to these nuns through the grill, you know, and leaving a lot of very, very puzzled nuns, of course, behind us, wondering what the hell were we doing there and what did we want? But this was what he liked to do. I'd drive him around and we'd go into all these convents and everything, and he'd be chatting up the nuns, you know. So mind you, I also remember having supper and what's it called? Mount Menery, the monks, yeah. And in the kitchens, he'd bring me into the kitchens, and the monks they all knew him, and they'd all feed us and everything. So he was well into it.
I think it's it's so peculiar, really. I actually have one of my best friends is an atheist, and he's gay as well. But he one of his friends is an enclosed nun at the Poor Clares in on College Road.
Yes,
so he goes
that,
every 3 months to visit Sister Faustina, one of his best friends ever. And it's just such an incongruous pairing of friendship.
There you go. Yeah, the Poor Clares. Yeah, we used to go there too and talk to the nuns. Yeah, through the grill. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But this particular nun used to drive a motor. She was a Harley Davidson driver before, and she used to live in Holland before she became hyper religious and went to live with the Poor Clares. I think she's the prioress there now. I'm not sure.
A little enclosed, very small place on College Road. Yeah, imagine after a life such as hers, how amazing.
I've just read a weird connection in my mind. Nuns through a little grilly and glory holes. Just a weird connection came to my mind.
There is an odd similarity. I'm
sorry. I'm just
not for the nuns of perpetual indulgence.
The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, yeah.
To say nothing of the passion and all that. Yeah.
Did the final scene, because you talk about a lot of the book being based on reality, and obviously the urn and them having the, ending up in the kitchen and them putting in the tea and all that, is that based on a story? Is there something behind that, or is that entirely made up? Or do you want to plead the fifth?
I'm trying to remember. I think I made that up.
Okay.
I think I did, but it was inevitable, with the notion that he wanted. Because Declan again, I mean, yes, I used to go up there with him, and my sister, who was so close to him, and we would go up there to that place and see the graveyard and Little Nelly and all that, So I just made that connection in my head. So, of course, the guy who was brought back in the urn was also a real person and spirit, come to think of it. but he wasn't actually. Yeah, you know, as I said, it's so long since I wrote it, I forget things. But I told you this before, Jamie, that the title of the book, "Mine That Is My Brother," that is a quotation. Will, I don't know whether Will might have heard of this, but there was a brother who brought his brother back from England in an urn.
Yeah.
Through customs, yeah?
Yeah.
Will is nodding. And the story went, true or false, but anyway, the story goes that when he was going through customs, you know, the scene that's in my book, and the customs officer says, "What the hell you got in there? You can't take a sealed container like that through customs." And Liam, my character Liam, says, "Mind that is my brother." Yeah. And it was fact, you see. That was factual. Will is nodding about the two brothers coming through customs, and this was a great joke, of course, around Cork, about how he had said, "Mind that is my brother" to the customs officer. That's where I got my title. So, you know, the origin of that idea was also based in fact, but like my Tony is not really related to that character. He's an invention from that point on. Yeah, so much of it is like the whole.
Was this the first fiction you had written or published, or had you written short fiction, or? I've
written a couple of short stories at just around that same time period. It was the first time I'd written.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it wasn't you as a child, it wasn't something like I'm going to become a writer, or that was that?
Well, I suppose I never thought I could, you know, and which was ridiculous in a way, because I was an avid reader from a very young age, you know. I read, I was quite advanced and all that. And of course, I did a degree in literature, in English literature. Shakespeare, actually. I got an MA, I did an MA in Shakespeare. And so, you know, why? I think I just went off to Africa and got distracted, you know what I mean? So I was busy in Africa, right? And didn't get around to writing. It might have been
Africa's a fun place to be in.
What? Africa?
It's a fun place, isn't it?
Yeah, you know Africa, do you?
Well, I'm from it, but I'm the token African here.
South African, you are, yeah.
Yes.
It's a terrific place to be. I know, I miss it. I wouldn't have left if it weren't for economic difficulties, you know, in Nigeria. And I had moved to Niger, but that part of the country took an awful dive economically, and it just wasn't viable with the kids, my children and all. But it's, I didn't want to leave it at all. It's fabulous, yeah. Fabulous people, terrific. Energy and vitality and humor, and very strong sort of psychic presence, you know, of those people. They're fabulous. Yeah. No, I didn't want to come back. No.
Is there any particular books that? Is there any particular books that you say, yeah, they have influenced my writing, or this book in particular, or you know what that you've drawn on, or you feel, oh yeah, I can see there what have influenced my work?
No.
There you go.
I mean, you know, what else would I say? I mean, obviously, I don't think I'm blowing my own trumpet if I say that nothing like that book was really written before. So it just was, you know, I think of its own. It wasn't based on anybody or anybody's writing as such. I remember when I was in Africa, Robert, a friend of mine, an English guy, and he said he couldn't understand me. He said because, of course, of the fact that I married into the Tuareg people, and all that, and was absolutely obsessed with them and all that. But he says he couldn't understand my fascination with this exotic Tuareg tribe, right? When I came from an exotic tribe myself, right? Meaning the Irish, of course, right? To get it. He's English, right? So he was making this point that in his view, we were already exotic. So
it can be Africa can be a very hypnotic and enticing place to be pulled into, because of its, I don't know, there's something about it that you can overwhelm your sensory self, and it can pull you right in. So you can hate it, or you can fall in love with it.
Most people fall in love with it, in my experience. I was in West Africa, and East Africa is even more wonderful, I do believe. Yes. And I know many people are absolutely in love with East Africa, South Africa. But it is, you feel at home, you know, kind of feel that you belong in a strange way. And of course, you're completely alien, but it doesn't feel like that. You know, you fit in, and the people are so welcoming and so warm, so friendly, you know, so bloody friendly, you know, and such fun. And you just immediately, like Robert says, there's a sensory kind of overload too, and you kind of just really feel you're embraced by the place. Yeah. And
I suppose it's quite a generalization, but I think it's quite true, is that in Africa, relationships are more important. Kinship and relationships are more important than things and places, and so it sort of, if you're a very relational sort of human being, then Africa can really be a wonderful place to be, because it's all about relationships in Africa.
Yes, absolutely. It's a kinship, who you belong to, the family, and your the extended family, and your village, and then your tribe, and everything. And it's all about that. And I think what you said is very true, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. I've had where I was in northern Nigeria to begin with, before I went to Niger, which is a Muslim. You know, it's not, it's more reserved, the people there, let's say, the people in the south, and the Yoruba, you know, down in Lagos, whatever. But the Irish people, I have a whole, you know, in the one place where I were, like at least 4 Irish people who just completely fell in love in the way you're describing, and who were absolutely accepted. But I think the kind of sense of fun and humor, back to talking about Cork again, you know, and was so much a part of it, because we're into that, you know, as we're already saying.
It's roguishness, because, again, a generalization, the Irish seem, from my eyes, seem to value the rogue and the person who's the freedom fighter and is against the status quo and the unfair sort of oppressor. And in Africa, there's very much a sense of that as well, like that roguishness, and of freedom of self as well.
So that kinship is very important in Ireland as well. When we finally met my father's family, he was born in Clifton, I think, in Galway, and he was illegitimate in the 1920s. So when we finally met them very late in life, I was sitting in a kitchen one night in this rural little place on the side of a mountain, and all the relations had gathered that knew my father when he was a kid and everything. And it was fascinating as a city person to sit there, and every one of them knew Jojo's cousin was married to her. And do you remember that field that they sold? And that they had a history, a complete, or everybody knew everything. And you talk about that fun, like the things they used to say about each other, like in the families, oh, she was that, or he was this. And it fascinated me, like, that they didn't need bloody well history books or anything. They all had it in a little area, like, you know.
And like, as I said, I grew up in Bantry, right, in Glengarriff in West Cork, and I'm well used to it. But, you know, some people, outsiders, kind of think that the people are maybe intrusive or nosy or whatever, and they don't really get it, that, you know, when they, like Will says, but I grew up with it, like, when people, they kind of ask, and, you know, and where are you from now? And, you know, and like, and who are you related to? And, oh, is this your first time here? And did any of your family, you know, and all this, and they're building up this web, you know, searching for links, but also just a kind of a curiosity, which is a natural kind of interest they have in other human beings, you know, but which outsiders might think is extremely rude or something, but it isn't. It's an interest. You know?
Well, I moved from Dublin down to Kenmare last year, and because my partner's from here, and I always say to him, I will never murder anybody in this town, because I will never get away with it. I can't walk through the street without. It will be reported back to me. Oh, you were seen walking past such and such earlier. I was like, who, where, what, how? Whereas in a city there's such anonymity. Whereas I suppose returning to the countryside, I am very aware that nothing is secret, and the only way to murder someone is to have everyone on side in the whole town and no one says anything. So.
Yeah, my Portuguese friend of mine, gay Portuguese friend, he sorry, it's just something that popped into my head. He said to me once that he suddenly realized, right? He spent a lot of time around. He suddenly realized that the way the Latin people like himself in Spain and Italy, and the tactile thing, the embracing and the kissing and all that physical thing that they go on with. And he said to me, oh, I suddenly realized, he said that, but that the Irish do that too, but they do it with their tongues, right? And he wasn't talking about anything sexual. Was how we talk, the way we talk, and the way we joke and communicate, and that we are equally as flirtatious and tactile in a different way, right? Without actually it being physical. Very true, isn't it? Very true, it is. Yeah.
It's the narrative. It's the narrative thing, and the I think that in Ireland, the oral history and poetry and storytelling is like central to the culture, and it's very valued. I remember when I first came in '99, I liked to dabble with poetry and stuff like that, and I would never in South Africa read poetry to friends because they would just roll their eyes or something. But I happened to be with some newfound friends in Cork. This was back in '99, and I said, "Oh, I've written a bit of a poem," and they said, "No, go on, read it to us." And I read it to them, and this group were like transfixed with it, and I was like, "What? This is so different to my own culture," where I would sort of be laughed at for being so silly as to think to read a poem to my friends.
Yeah.
But we'd also keep you in your place, because if you got famous with that poetry or something, like we'd be like, "Oh, look at him! I knew him when he had, no arse in his pants." We're very good at making sure, you're good, like, but we'll keep you there, like, we remind you. That's one thing I love in a way about us. Like, I mean, other countries, somebody does well or anything, and they're all, "Oh, congratulations, you're I knew him."
Who does he
you
think
just can't get above yourself, like, ever.
Yeah.
Oh no, begrudgery, we're famous for it. Yeah. We're the best begrudgers going. No doubt about that.
That's colonialism. That's a sort of artifact of colonialism.
Yes.
Well,
it is. Yeah. It's very striking here. All right, it's democratic in that sense. Nobody's better than the next man, and we're very strong on that. And you're right; it probably does come from a colonial history, and of course not just that. I mean, if you look at England and the hierarchical thing, which they still live with, and we don't have any of that at all. I mean, everybody's on an equal footing. Everybody.
And then, of course, I mean, you don't want to put your head above the parapet because it'll get shot off. You sort of want to be. This is something that I had to grapple with, was like the implicit nature of Irish language and communication and stuff. Like I found, like as a South African, I would give direct commands at work, would say, "Please type this out for me," or whatever, and people were horrified, and I had to learn very quickly how to be implicit and sort of use language that was non-direct, and I couldn't take it at first. I stop beating around the bush, just get to the point. But now I see it differently. It's like it's a beautiful thing.
Are you Dutch? Do you have Dutch ancestry or no?
Yes, I certainly did.
Yeah, the Dutch are I have a Dutch brother-in-law, and of course they're like that. Straight, straight. It has its virtues. I must say it's good.
Sure, it does, but it can be very violent as well.
Yeah. Because we're ultra deferential, you know. It often strikes me like we kind of, if you want somebody to do something, you don't just say do it. You say, could you do it, or would you mind
when you're ready,
or when you're ready, or you know, would you mind hand that to me, or you do not give the direct order. And I mean, it goes to extremes, like when you'd say, it struck me once very strongly when I hear people say, you'd never bring that for me. You never, like if you wanted somebody to bring something from one room to another or something like that in a business place, you'd say, you'd never bring that book for me, would you? You know, and it's a request to do it, but it's kind of the extreme indifference where you don't even say, would you please, or something, but like, you'd never do it for me, would you? You know?
Like, I know I would have friends of mine, the word no is obviously the big Irish thing that no one ever says, which makes, that's probably the one I've come across most from friends from other countries who really get frustrated by if somebody's like, oh, I'm arranging a night out, who's going to come? No one will say no, but there'll be all these kind of ways of saying yes that are no, and that just drives them mad. Yeah. Oh, mate, sure, we'll see.
It's a big long story if you don't turn up on the night. Instead of just saying straight out, oh, I don't know, look, I didn't feel like it. Oh, you know, so and so died, or so and so this. We can't be. We can just directly say, I didn't go. Like, you know, there's like, oh no, that'd be terribly impolite.
Oh yeah.
I guess, Gaye, I had always sort of misunderstood something about your life. I'd always assumed that you'd been in Cork up until you'd written Mind That 'Tis My Brother, and that your African period had come thereafter, because that's the order in which I read your book.
No.
So I, of course, assumed that was it.
No,
and that's where it comes in to be interesting. I wonder.
Can you see Can you see? This is one of my bits of Africa there, right?
Hello. Yeah, you do.
Hi.
In disguise as a technician.
Yes, as a technician.
This is
great technician. I just wonder if that's one of the things that really captured me about your book is your ability that perhaps it's because you came back to Cork.
That was what
captured Cork.
Yeah.
Because I had just always assumed that, you know, you just knew all these people and knew it all so well, and that you'd put it on paper. But now I see, you know, you'd come back to Cork and you were hearing these stories and you know, getting your outsider impression of the place you come from. And I wonder if that, you know, made the big difference in your book being so good at portraying Cork, is that you were looking at it as an outsider.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. I came back and I'm there, I'm on the buses, I'm going around town, I'm listening to people, you know, and there was that little distance that, like I said, like Tony in the Urn, you know, that made me very alert and aware of all that stuff. Exactly that. It was exactly that. But I mean, as I said, I'm Cork person. I grew up in West Cork, but my parents and my relatives and everybody are Cork City people, which is a very different thing, which Cork people are well aware. Nobody else would be, I suppose. There's a huge difference between the culture and accent and everything in Cork City to West Cork. But so in a sense, I mean, it was absolutely my place and always had been. And all my relatives are still in Cork City. In fact, you know, my name is Shortland, and the only Shortlands in Ireland are in Cork City. Because, I shouldn't say this, this really spoils it, doesn't it? But my great-grandfather was English, in fact. You know, I'll admit that. You must have wondered where I got the name, right? But exactly that, exactly as you say, that I came back and I just became ultra aware, you know, of all that, and it all kind of really struck me and charmed me. Yeah.
I think if the ordering of the books had been the other way, and I know this is hypothetical, but if you'd maybe written the Mind That 'Tis My Brother sort of as at the very beginning, do you think that you would have had the same confidence, I suppose, or to be so direct, you know, or so it was a very fearless book that you've written, and I'm just wondering, do you think it was just you were coming back and there's just that sense, you've spoken about being that sense of of Cork and not of Cork, that feeling, that was there fearlessness in that, or do you think if you'd actually written the books in the different order that it would have been different? Or
but I didn't write with it. Mine, that was my first book.
Yeah, but he's asking a hypothetical, is if you wrote the other books first,
right?
How would you think you would have written Mine That Is My Brother the same? Would you be as blunt with it? Or would you
well, I suppose I was a different person, wasn't I? I mean, when I came back after my long spell in Africa, obviously I was still me and still am, but I obviously was formed too and changed whatever by my life in Africa and my experiences there. So like, I wasn't the same person I would have been hypothetically if I had never left. Yeah, I was a different person to whatever degree. Yeah. And maybe that made me fearless too. Robert might understand that. Africa rubbing off on me.
Yeah, you sure need to be fearless.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. You learn to be fearless. Yes, you have to be brave. It's true in Africa. Mark, you were...
Courage is a quality of the heart,
What? Sorry?
Courage is a quality of the heart.
Yes, it is indeed.
No, I was just going to ask you, Gaye, if you remember, because it's quite a while back now, as you were saying, to remember things. Do you remember how the book was received after you had written it, and kind of, how did you launch it as such? Like, I was surprised when you were saying, Poolbeg were so liberal with you that you didn't have to, hide away some of the explicit things in the book, which I was surprised at, given when it was written and all,
Well, as I said, this I think was largely probably, maybe I'm being unfair, but I think it was a lot to do with Kate Fuse O'Brien, right? And the fact that she thought it was all fantastic. But that's unfair now to people like Philip McDermott, who was who founded that company and was a great man for the books. But no, I don't. It got a fantastic reaction. It got fantastic. It got really great reviews and piles of reviews, all positive. And even from England too, reviews, and they're all extremely positive, extremely understanding about, and it really was all, there was nothing negative apart from Books Ireland, who said I couldn't write, which as I've already said, but it really was all very positive. People are so, but of course comedy and humor is a wonderful thing, because as you know, it's a powerful thing. And of course it carried it along too, and people just adored the humor and the fun. And I'd meet people and they'd be telling me that and reviews that would even sort of say, like, don't read this on the bus, because you'll make a show of laughing or crying, this kind of thing, and on the whole, people loved the humor. They just loved the fun of it.
I definitely have to agree with that. I think it was the one thing that a book like that would not have been, say if it was written just, the sex, it was whatever, but the humor, people just laugh so much about it. And I mean, to this day, the Mayfield bus is still as mad as ever. I've often said it to John and Bruce, before this lockdown, I'd be coming home on the bus, and somebody from the back of the bus would be shouting up, fucking bastard, waiting like at him. I know, girl, the other one would be shouting down from the front of the bus. And you're like, their lives are being shouted out as you jump on the bus. And I always think in the book, if I'm on the bus and then people start like that, like I think, yeah, she had to be observing all of this, like when it was going on around you.
I was, yeah.
They live their life so openly, I'd be quiet about something that had happened to me, but they're shouting out, oh, I'll go home now and look, he'll have the beer on the table, the place is in a mess, but they're shouting this like openly. Thanks. People are listening. I'm getting embarrassed for them.
My favorite was walking down North Main Street and one girl saying to another, did you get your hole on Saturday night, girl?
That's perfect. Yes.
That's exactly it.
And then the other one goes, I did, girl, I did. He He was massive.
Are you an actor, Robert?
No.
Really, you should be. That was terribly, terribly good. Bang on.
I could almost see that young female. You did it so
And then
well.
the other one goes, and how's your fanny now? She says, the other one goes, fucking raw.
One of my favorite lines from the book actually is from Declan's mother. Where she says about the children having no gratitude, and she says, you put your heart up in a plate for him, and shit is your thanks.
Oh, that's so. That's so. Irish mother would say.
Yeah, that's so real,
all, doesn't it?
It's so real. Like my nan was a very proud Blackpool woman, and she used to always say that, whenever you'd go out of your way for somebody, it's like, shit is your thanks by you getting for it. Father.
Yeah, and the mothers, yeah, and it was very important in the book to make it clear that the way Dick would be going on about his mother, and up in the bed, she's starving me, because he'd spend all his money, and then he'd have to go to bed until dole day, and but that he adored her, and to make that point that he absolutely adored his mother, which of course again a big Irish thing. And it was important to make that point.
I had a question, because just on the subject of sex in the book, it's funny when you're reading it. I'm because of the time period that it was. Anytime something sex related came up, I was like, "Where's the condom?" In my head, even though it's fiction. How did you address that? I think it's funny right now because I'm watching films and I see people. Sorry, I'm probably talking a bit loud. Not wearing masks in films in crowds, and I always feel like going into the TV and going, "Where's your masks?" And it's funny reading your book. Because it's the 90s, every sexual encounter that happened, I was it was the first thing that came into my mind. I'm wondering how you handle that.
As I've said already, God knows why, I don't know what I was at. I might have been influenced by something silly, like the fact that I Will Always Love You belonged to the 90s, right? Mm. But as a matter of fact, the majority of the book really belonged to the 70s. And the 80s. It was all a much earlier period, as Will recognizes, and I because I was there in the 90s, that's how the confusion arises. I don't know why I did this with the book, but that I did mix it up, you see, and because I was there as a spectator in the 90s, but most of my material that I got from people was describing an earlier period in the 70s. So it's not at all clear as far as the time. If I was editing a book now and out of that, I'd say, what the hell are you at, Is it the 90s or is it the 70s? You can't do that, But it was my first book. I probably didn't know what I was doing. There's kind of a mix up there. So I was really talking about much earlier period before, the Where's Your Condom, really,
Yeah, because even number 4 in the Curtain Street was gone, in the 90s. That's why I was reading the book as my time era, the early 80s and stuff And unfortunately, before pre-ASA and everything, condoms weren't the thing that would have been in the 90s. I was working with the Gay Men's Health Project in 94, and we were all promoting condoms and everything,
Then, yeah.
Early 80s, no. Not here anyway, no, condoms were not.
And I think it also goes back to, that's, in my mind, a lot of the period that we were mentioning before, Larry Kramer and the people that came before, and that they were so gay positive and sex positive. And then you had this literal battle that went on within the community between the good gays that were all really responsible and wearing condoms and doing everything possible to prevent AIDS and stop its spread. And you had the old people that had always been like, well, we've always gone down to the docks and done it this way. So, why should we change? And even if we've changed, we should still celebrate the old days. And this is very much a celebration of those earlier days when it was such a repressed group that it was just its own little microcosm of society, or not even a microcosm of society.
A bubble.
It's bubble. It's bubble in society.
Yeah.
I would recommend anybody who wants to read about the thing about good AIDS, good gays, bad gays, back in those times, surviving the plague. It's a brilliant book that literally documents the whole battle. Larry Kramer, all his crowd, you know, the battles. You would have known it, John and Bruce, you were there. Like, and it's set in San Francisco, New York. Surviving the plague. It literally condenses that totally into the battle that went on, like, and the whole thing of like he got vilified, like Larry Kramer, even though he, you know, everybody seems like he was destroyed like by people a number of occasions, and then you know everything kind of changed. We kind of had to when people were dying and everything, if we needed, you know, to get the help we needed, but kind of we lost stuff. I think one thing I loved about the book, that if you were there in the 80s, the sense of community. We were a little group that used to go cruising down around the Marines and everything. I'll be giving a load away of stuff here. And we all knew each other. And then we ended up going to house parties. It was a different kind of scene because there was no clubs as such, like, you know, so everything was, it was almost an intimacy, like, you know, I mean, like you'd be there one week and you'd be like at a house party and you'd just say like, oh yeah, I had him last week and him. It was a bit like the show that we just saw. It's the same. It was just like that. Like, it was rapid. I remember one night, I probably shouldn't share this, but I remember one night, but you won't know them. I came home with a guy, and in the morning I came downstairs to get my breakfast, and who was in the kitchen but his brother, who I'd slept with the week before. And I was like, oh, what do I do here?
You're a bad guy, Will. You're a bad guy.
He just came down the stairs all relaxed about it, like, you know, introduced. I was like, yeah, I know him. And it was like, these things just happened. When you mentioned condoms, yeah. It was like,
speaking of house parties, there's somebody in this actual book. They talk about someplace in Bottivant. Does that ring any bells to you? Maybe it's in somebody house parties. It was interesting. I just went Bottivant outside of the city. I don't know.
Mainly by the lesbian community.
Okay.
Oh, the lesbians. So them
parties. Nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
No, I actually know who wrote the book and everything, like, and I know that crowd in Butterman.
Oh yeah, okay.
But well, you know, in my book, I've exactly a scene like that. You may have forgotten, but there's the scene where they go down the docks with the and he meets a fellow from the banana boat or whatever. And the thing about he wakes up the next morning and the fella, there's another couple on the top bunk.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
well, that really resonated with me.
You have a light, right? And it's his brother.
That really resonated with me because I woke up on the banana boat one morning and it was early in the morning, and myself and the guy I was with, the other Cork lad, we had to walk off the boat. And of course, at that time, the dockers used to be down early, you know, if they were unloading the banana boat or the coal boats, they'd be there. We got a chorus of clapping as we walked down the gangplank of the boat. It's like, "Oi, lads," was all this kind of thing, like, you know, two little puffs falling down the gangplank, 7 o'clock in the morning. It was like, sorry?
Bashing you for being a puff was minor compared to the Cork pride that you'd taken the ship.
Yeah. If I hadn't woken up, I'd probably, by now, I'd have been off there in white slavery or something. Oh, fantasy.
You're in my book, yeah?
There was a lot of that book that I thought, who was she talking to?
Well, probably a lot of it might have been you, because I mean, I was just hearing all these stories about random.
Well, the
people.
Declan character, I knew a Declan, and that always confused me. And I know Declan to this day, like, and I was like, no, I don't think it's him. Is it him? It isn't him. Isn't it?
No, wasn't it not that Declan? No.
It's interesting though, having come to Cork. Bruce and I moved here in 2007, and as we said, one of the first things we read of Cork literature was your book. And I can't tell you over the intervening years how many, perhaps hundreds of people have told me that they're characters in your book.
Yes, I know.
And I've met more people than could possibly have ever been in your book that have claimed to be characters in your book.
I know. I was
some people
the Gaye Club.
Little quotes. oh, this was the I was the person that was the waiter here. I was the person that was this. And but there's lots and lots of people that believe themselves to be in your book.
I remember I go to the gay club and various venues like that in more recent years, and there's one transvestite person, right, who used to kind of stalk me and kind of stand off to the side, sort of smiling, right, and never actually approached me, but would stand quite close and smiling with me. And I mean, it's perfectly clear that this person thought that they were in the book and that they were probably Mad Mary, you know, the Mad Mary.
I was just going to say it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty clear that this person was waiting for me to recognize the fact.
But you see, some of the characters you would. I thought I knew Mad Mary when reading the book, because they used to be transvestite art that used to come to number 4, and he would come in his ordinary working gear. He was a corporation worker. Sometimes he'd have the thing, and he would go in the back and he would change and come out in these. I'm sorry, like he needed help in actual makeup and wigs and everything. A horrendous looking transvestite. But what I was reading about Mad Mary was, oh yeah, I know it.
Maybe it was Mad Mary.
I think, you see, if you were around at the time, those of us, it isn't that you would identify maybe that one character as that person, but we knew a lot of people like that, you know, yes, in our circles, like, so. Yes. It's kind of, it could be that, but.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we've only been chatting 2 hours, so maybe it was great. So probably time for a cup of tea. Really great chat, and so I suppose just thanks again to Cork City Libraries for arranging, and lovely to chat to you, Gaye.